We're going to go through a banded unilateral pull-down dynamic isometric. So for this exercise, I'm going to use a band and I've attached it to the top of a pull-up bar. Now I'm going to set myself up in a kneeling position, in a slightly bent over position with my arm overhead, but this is an exercise that you can do in any position that you like. Now, if I explain this exercise into zones to begin with, okay, what we want to think is in each zone, we can be able to spend a bit of time there. And this is important when deciding how much tension to take from the band. So this will be my zone 1, my starting position, okay, with the elbow back here. Zone 2 will be more or less elbow closer in line with shoulder. And zone 3 will be finishing just shy of a lockout. So this will be where my arm will be closest to the overhead position. So that's those 3 zones. And then what I'm also trying to do with this exercise is provide as much movement variability while I perform it. So that means I'll be able to move my elbow into different places to challenge that shoulder joint. So I can move it up and down. I'll be able to move the shoulder blade a little bit in different places, and I can even play with elbow rotation. So moving between supination to pronation and all in between those places. And all of this can be done in combination. So I'm going to give an example of how to perform this exercise. I'll kneel down and then I'm going to pull the band in. So this will mimic that row position, okay? And then from here, I want to assess how the band feels in terms of how much tension there is. I can also decide how I hold that band. If I feel holding it this isn't great, maybe I want to hold it in a different way. I personally like feeding it through my wrist and then holding it in this manner. Then, if I feel there's not much tension, I'll scoot back a bit to the point where I can feel the band is starting to pull me, or I can feel the resistance of the band work quite well to kind of force me closer towards moving into the overhead position. So I'm starting to shake a little bit. This is what I'm looking for. It's a little challenging. So I'm going to start to move my elbow into different places. I'm moving it out to the side. As I move this out to the side, I can also explore other things like elbow rotation, moving that back and forth. I'm still trying to stay within this zone 1, so I'm trying to keep this elbow pulled back as best as possible as I move into all these places. And the intent is to try to work as many areas as possible, not provide any sort of patterned movements, but rather just work in all the areas. I move slow in order to assess how things feel as I'm moving into different places, assessing my strength, assessing my control. There may be areas I feel a little vulnerable or a little weak, and so that's why I want to move slow, just to be mindful on how things are feeling as they're being challenged and loaded in different places. Still exploring all different positions. The band's starting to win. It's pulling me into zone 2 now. What I can do as well, if I feel there's not much tension as the band starts to ease, there's less slack as my arm lengthens out, I can then move back to increase that tension on the band and then continue. Constantly fighting, exploring various areas of this exercise throughout the movement. And then the band starts to take me into zone 3. I still continue. I'm still moving as best as I can into various places. Once again, if I feel the band's easing off, I can scoot back and take more tension onto the band. So that's an example of a rep right there. Just to recap, from that position, you have your 3 zones, zone 1, zone 2, zone 3. You want to be able to spend a bit of time in all those 3 zones. In terms of movement variabilities, there is a degree of being able to move this shoulder blade around as you go through this eccentric. There's also the ability to move the elbow up and down, elbow rotation, and maybe even a bit of wrist movement, all being done in combination. And lastly, this exercise can also be performed in different positions. So I could get maybe a little bit more specific to my overhead position and be working against a resistance band from down here, directly underneath the bar, and then going through my movements as so. So feel free to explore different ways of setting up against the band for this exercise.